Sponsored by Surfshark. Is it already over for the Galaxy S26? Because if you believe some of the rumors, then the most expensive non-folding Samsung phones are set for a pretty weird year going into 2026. Not only will they not be first with Qualcomm's new silicon, but we could be looking at the retirement of the most interesting device in the lineup, a confusing rebrand for the base model, and another generation of the Ultra being sustained on inertia alone. So is Samsung even trying anymore when it comes to flat smartphones? Let's jump into what we know so far. So over the past few years, the Galaxy S line has gone from blessing us with small, Plus, and Ultra variants to introducing an edgy alternative in 2025. Historically, the Plus has basically been a blown-up version of the regular small Galaxy S, occasionally with one or two spec upgrades to sweeten the deal. And the Ultra was what you got if you craved Samsung's best cameras with the added bonus of that S Pen stylus. But in 2026, the most interesting Galaxy S might be going away. There may or may not be an S26 Pro, depending on which set of rumors you believe, and the dreaded Samsung Exynos chip could be back across the board, although that might not actually be a bad thing this time around. So let's start at the top. The Galaxy S26 or S26 Pro, depending on who you believe, is the new base model for the series. And it seems based on CAD leaks from the ever-reliable OnLeaks that the outside of the device isn't changing too much from the previous generation. Leaks earlier in the fall tipped it as carrying the S26 Pro moniker to pit it directly against Apple's iPhone 17 Pro. But more lately, Sam Mobile claims the Pro name has been ditched and it will once again just be plain old Galaxy S26. Obviously, branding can change right up to the day of announcement. For example, if Samsung did go with an S26 Pro, you may expect the regular S26 name to perhaps be repurposed for the S26 FE. And we do have a couple more months for further changes to play out in either direction. But the fact alone that Samsung apparently was at least kicking around the idea of a Pro Galaxy S means the long-neglected smaller model, whatever it's called, may hopefully get a few choice upgrades. But they've mostly left us guessing so far. The only real spec detail we have is around a 4300 mAh battery capacity for the smaller S26. A decent upgrade from the previous 4000, but not exactly the sexiest thing you're ever going to see on a spec sheet. However, there's also been a suggestion based on information unearthed in One UI firmware files that there will be once again no major camera changes in the base model S26, which is pretty disappointing. Those aren't the only specs that matter though, so we will be crossing our fingers for some unexpected surprises elsewhere. This is where it gets a bit more spicy though. The Galaxy S26 Plus was for a while assumed to have been kicked to the curb in favor of the S26 Edge. Leaks as recently as September had tipped the lineup as being S26 Pro, Edge, and Ultra, but it seems the middle child of Samsung's lineup will in fact return in place of the Edge in 2026. It's reported the company had hoped the current Edge would outsell the current Plus, but apparently no. That's right, it seems apparently poor sales of the S25 Edge have prompted Samsung to not only discontinue that model, but also cancel its successor. Not a great sign for slim phones in general, given that Apple is also reported to have cut production for its iPhone Air just 1 month after launch. The apparently cancelled S26 Edge can be seen in CAD leaks here and actually seems to be pretty interesting, taking some inspiration from Apple by shifting much of its componentry into a larger camera plateau so it could slim down more of the actual body, which would apparently allow it to bump its battery capacity up to around 4200 mAh. But instead of an Edge, the mid-level Plus is returning, and it's possible this return may have triggered the name change for the smaller model as well. I mean, if you think about it, you've got a Pro and a Plus, it's not immediately clear which is the higher end model. Is the Plus not also technically a Pro? So ditching the Pro name entirely just makes things less confusing. You go back to S26, S26 Plus, and S26 Ultra, the names that everyone knows. Exact spec details for the Plus are unclear, after all it has just been uncancelled, but we'd expect them to be broadly in line with the smaller S26, meaning a new SoC, probably the same cameras and maybe iterative upgrades to things like display and charging spec. Definitely less interesting to tech nerds like us than an S26 Edge, but then it seems people just weren't buying those slim phones. Whatever device you choose in the next year or so though, you need to make sure it's as secure as it is powerful, and that's where this video's sponsor comes in, Surfshark. Surfshark is a VPN that helps you secure your online data for added privacy and security. In other words, Surfshark protects you from online threats 24/7 wherever you go. A single plan covers unlimited devices, and Surfshark is supported on all major platforms like iOS, macOS, Android, and Windows. And for added privacy, its no logs policy means Surfshark doesn't track or store what you do online. And it's super fast, with high-speed servers in over 100 locations across the globe, so you can appear as if you're browsing from anywhere in the world, crucial in a world of increasing content geo-restrictions. Even better, the alert feature can notify you the moment your email, ID, credit card, or other personal data gets leaked online. Or to preempt the bad guys, Alt ID can create a whole separate virtual identity for you. So hit the link in the description to get Surfshark for the equivalent of just $1.89 per month, plus 4 months extra free. Thanks to Surfshark for sponsoring. Now back to the video. The processor used in the S26 series also has the potential of turning into a bit of a point of contention, as it seems Samsung's Exynos 2600 SoC could be used much more widely than the current 2500 was this year. That is to say, expect to see it in at least some countries in all 3 models, S26, Plus, and yes, even the Ultra. It's a move that points to Samsung looking to cut costs so they can avoid paying the premium demanded by Qualcomm for its top-tier Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5. If you know your Samsung history though, then you'll already be aware of Exynos' toxic reputation among Galaxy fans. Lower benchmark scores, more heat, inferior performance, and worse 5G. But the upcoming Exynos 2600 could break that track record. The good news is that, according to the Korean press, the next-gen Exynos is set to be better than ever, with leaked benchmarks pointing to Apple beating GPU performance, and these numbers aren't always reliable as they'll come from early hardware running pre-production firmware, but they do at least suggest that Exynos should be much more competitive in 2026, which would let Samsung save money without compromising on performance. It's also not clear how things will shake out chip-wise in the US market, which has used Qualcomm chips for almost all of its Samsung flagships for almost a decade at this point, with the exception of the combo breaker of the Galaxy Z Flip 7. If Samsung viewed that device as a successful trial run, and it's confident enough in the new XE2600, again, look at those benchmark numbers, then we could indeed see an all Exynos Galaxy lineup in 2026. So here's the Galaxy S26 Ultra according to leaked CAD renders, and from the outside it's barely any more interesting than the other two. Its corners are slightly more rounded, giving the series a more uniform look overall, and according to these CAD leaks, the camera cluster has been tweaked so that the 3 main ones are now more in line with the other Samsung handsets. So far, I guess, so boring, and we're continuing to move even further away from the very boxy Galaxy Note look of phones like the S22 Ultra. There is some potential for controversy in terms of colors though. Samsung has long been known for playing it safe with the color palette of its premium phones, and leaked information used to build renders from CAD specs points to navy blue headline colors for the S26 and silver for the Plus. But a photo of apparent S26 Ultra dummy units from Feline's social media leaker Ice Universe suggests a very familiar vibrant orange hue might also be joining the fray, at least for that S26 Ultra. I don't know how accurate this will turn out to be. It really feels like something the Samsung of 10 years ago might have done, but who knows? Drop a note in the comments if you think this thing will turn out to be real. Camera-wise though, it appears to be another disappointing year for anyone expecting dramatically different optics from the top-tier Samsung phone camera. Pretty much 100% of the spec leaks point to the next Ultra keeping the same 200 megapixel primary, 50 megapixel ultra wide, and 50 megapixel super zoom, plus the crummy 10 megapixel 3x shooter from the last generation. Meaning any photo or video improvements are going to have to come through improvements to processing, or possibly stabilization or the lenses. In particular, I'm just baffled to see that old 3x lens still being used after all these years, when it really contributes almost nothing to the overall camera setup. Equally disappointing, I guess, is the battery spec is set to remain at 5000 mAh, which on paper is actually less than the iPhone 17 Pro Max in eSIM regions, though as Samsung proved with the S25 Ultra, it is definitely still possible with decently optimized software to get great battery life out of that size of cell. Display tech apparently is set for an upgrade though, with reports from Korea's ET News suggesting the Ultra will be the only S26 to use Samsung's leading M14 OLED panel technology, which is slimmer, brighter, and more power efficient, and just happens to be the same technology used in the iPhone 17 Pro. And there's even a suggestion Samsung might have its own electronic version of those privacy screen protectors coming in the S26 Ultra, with this screenshot seeming to show the UI to enable it in One UI 8. Rumors earlier in 2025 of a fold-style under-display camera being utilized in the S26 Ultra seem to have been debunked in more recent months, however, so the hole punch, it seems, lives on for another year. Other Ultra upgrades are said to include a brighter f/1.4 aperture for the main camera and, at long last, Qi 2 charging support, aka MagSafe, which suggests Samsung has found a way to include those magnets without breaking S Pen support. And finally, some late-breaking reports suggest that production delays could push some Galaxy S26 models out to a March 2026 launch date, though the same reports point to the Ultra dodging that particular bullet and still entering mass production on schedule for a January launch. As was the case last year, I think with the S26 Ultra, what makes this phone exciting or not is going to have to do with smaller details, like AI features and things to do with the hand feel and display borders, things that don't necessarily jump out at you on a spec sheet, but do make a big difference in everyday use. So this phone may feel like more of an upgrade once we actually get our hands on it versus what we see on leaked spec sheets right now. Still, I couldn't exactly disagree with you if you called this yet another pretty iterative year for the Galaxy S. So with all that said, you've got to ask yourself, why is Samsung apparently playing it so safe with the Galaxy S26? And the answer, I think, has to do with who they're targeting for upgrades and how they view the Galaxy S these days. Whenever the company announces new phones and briefs journalists and influencers on them, they always talk about improvements from much older Galaxy phones from a few generations ago. For example, S22 going to S25 Ultra. Those are the kinds of upgrades mainstream phone buyers are going to be making, as opposed to tech nerds going from, say, an S24 to an S25. I also think it would be kind of naive to think that there isn't an element of cost cutting here, especially when we're talking about Exynos playing a much larger role globally. So the Galaxy S isn't over, it's just settled into a groove where upgrades come at a slower pace until we reach the next super cycle for upgrades, whenever that might happen to be. And I think Samsung's decided that the foldable space is actually where you want to be if you want a fancier, more expensive smartphone that can do more. Not to say flat phones are passé, but Samsung isn't interested, it seems, in chasing specs around things like battery capacities and image sensors like its Chinese rivals are. Instead, if you want to push the boat out and get the most advanced Samsung tech, well, that's where the Flip, Fold, and soon the Trifold will be. So let me know in the comments, has Samsung done enough to earn your attention with the Galaxy S26 next year based on what we know so far? What's your take on the demise of the Galaxy S25 Edge and S26 Edge, which really does seem to have gone down as a disastrous flop? Stick around and subscribe for more Samsung comparisons coming very soon, but in the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.